and it'll go into how you can prove that to your boss to get the raise you deserve.
My apologies. I don't understand.
Seriously, Google, you talk now.
That's going to be the intro.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. That's fine.
Hit it.
Welcome to the Test Talks podcast, the place to go to geek out on software testing. And now your host, whose mission is to help you succeed with test automation, Joe Colantonio.
Hey, it's Joe, and welcome to another episode of Test Talks. In this episode, we'll be test talking with the lazy coder himself, Andrew Krug. Andrew just created a brand new resource called Selenium, Above and Beyond, and that's what we'll be talking about today. So get ready to discover a learning package that takes you beyond beginner-level automation and to a whole new level of automation awesomeness. So listen up and find out how to leverage your existing Selenium scripts for performance testing, security testing, and more. Check it out. Test Talks is sponsored by the fantastic folks at Sauce Labs, the cloud-based automated testing platform that eliminates the need to maintain your own Selenium grid and test infrastructure. Try it for free today. Visit testtalks.com and click on the Sign Up Now link under the homepage sponsor section. Hey, Andrew. Welcome to Test Talks.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
It's great to have you back on the show, and I'm really excited about today's episode because I think you created a brand new, awesome resource called Selenium Above and Beyond. I think it's a book, and also you can get videos on this awesome training. But before we get into Andrew, what have you been up to?
A whole bunch of stuff. I'm now a full-time consultant, as opposed to last time I was just starting the transition. And I do a lot more trainings now and general consulting work for test automation. Or as you put it, automation awesomeness. I
know you're also the Selenium instructor at Selenium Conf. So how's that been? I think you've been the official one for like a year or so. Yeah, it's a year now. It's interesting revamping the actual content now because the past couple conferences sort of died down in interest because a lot of people have a lot of great getting started with Selenium resources. So I'm beefing mine up to have more comprehensive stuff in it for any level of Selenium experience you have. And that's actually what I really like about your book. It's really titled well, Selenium and Beyond, because I think you cover a lot of topics here that you don't find in most Selenium books. So I think you have something on security testing, performance testing, responsive web testing, a whole bunch of cool stuff. So I thought we'd dive into each one of those and just give people a flavor of, what this is all about and what they're getting when they get a hold of Selenium Above and Beyond. So I guess the first thing I love to ask authors is, why did you create this resource? And I think you alluded to it in your last answer, but why did you create this book video series? I like to think of it more as a package instead of a book. Okay. It was originally going to be a book, but a book doesn't really do it justice because there's a whole lot more than that. I mean, there's videos, there's code repos. For some of the languages, they're actually going to be workable, like self-run sort of courses. So like the code's there and you can input the answers, then you can actually get validation if it was right or not, even without me helping you out there or doing any online video trainings. The reason why I made it, though, was because if you do an Amazon search for Selenium books, you'll come across a ton of books on how to get started with Selenium, and that's about it. There's no really advanced courses that are on there. There's no intermediate courses or anything like that. It's all just basic beginner stuff with maybe there might be, if you read through some of the ones that are quote-unquote intermediate, it's all like basic stuff. It's all like the good general practices that everyone should be doing anyways, which I see more as beginners topics. Nothing advanced, really, with Selenium. To get the advanced material, you have to go to all the conferences, watch all the presentations, and piece together all those different pieces. And to me, that's very time-consuming and tedious for anybody that's doing this for their company. You can't spend every day following all these different resources, watching all the videos, going through all the training courses, because you just don't have the time to do that. So this was going to be like the full-on everything that I've learned over the years and everything that comes up as well as the state of evolution changes will be included in it, and what's the best practices for each thing to use. So for this particular package, can someone be a beginner? And like you said, it's Selenium and beyond, so they still get the foundations, or would they need to know some sort of basic Selenium before they were actually able to get a lot of benefits that you're offering here?
Yeah. So there is a code repo that will start you off with all the best practices baked in. However, I don't go into why they're the best practices per se for some of it, like page objects. For that, I'd recommend like Dave Heffner's Selenium guidebook, just because that's a really like in-depth, how do you do all the minor things with Selenium, all the details, interactions. But I at least cover it to a degree, so that you, like, these are the best practices, and this is why. However, the minor details and how everything works is better covered in like Dave's book.
So you explained something earlier, and I just wanted to dive into it a little bit more, where someone can interact with the code with the browser and get feedback. How does that work?
Yeah, so the JetBrains product called PyCharm, there's an educational version, which allows me to create sample code files that have very specific areas where it allows a student to input text in to actually try stuff out. And then the master file behind it has what the correct answer is, and then I can do like tips and everything inside of it. So essentially like an offline version of an online course.
So I think also the way you're approaching this is a little different. Is I think you're building as you go, which I think is a good idea. A lot of times people write a book for a year or two without getting feedback. And I think you're going to release, maybe I'm wrong, a section and iterate based on maybe feedback or where people want to go. What's your approach to actually creating this package, I guess, is the better question.
Yeah, I'm trying to get like a chapter out every couple of weeks for some of the people that got the beta access product, just to get their feedback on and actually try out the code examples on different systems, because I already have it working on my system. But I don't want people that are accessing the book once it gets fully launched to have the issue of, well, it worked on my machine, but it didn't work on mine, on this other machine. So with any luck, the beta testers will try it out on their different systems, and it should be all smoothed out. So by the time it actually is full launch, the code examples work for any person with any machine, or at the very least troubleshooting steps on, okay, if you got this error message, this is the problem, and this is the really short fix for it, or at least what the next step should be. If you need like IT for your company to give you more permissions on your system, or whatever the case may be, but not just vague or undocumented error messages.
As we mentioned, you are the lead Selenium trainer at Selenium Conf. Is there anything questions you got asked over and over again that made it into this package that you're like, okay, I'm just going to address this because a lot of people seem to be asking for it, and there's nothing specifically out there to help them?
That's a great question, Joe. One of the common things is that there might be one or two really smart people on the team that are very versed in Selenium, but there's always a difficulty of getting new people involved with the test automation aspect. And I have a bunch of patterns that I use to address that, to make it a non-issue for them when they work with the test automation framework. A lot of different programming patterns that simplify it so that new people or very inexperienced people do not have the issues that you experience typically when starting with a new code project that you're unfamiliar with. So people that are new to test automation or programming, they typically there's a lot of stuff they have to learn to get started with it. With specific programming patterns, you can make their life easier to at least be able to contribute to it. By doing so, they can become members of the team without having too much knowledge, but they can still contribute. Feel like they're actually contributing, not just asking questions all day long.
Awesome. Love that concept. So can you give us an example?
So yeah, an example of that would be the Fluent Process, the Fluent pattern, which is just method training and method cascading, where you have every method returns an object that you can interact with more. So if you're filling out a form, every time you fill out a field in that form, it returns the base page object over again, and then you can interact with other elements that are on that page. If an interaction is moving you to a new page, you would instantiate the new page that you're loading to, and then return that. So your test would look something like homepage.login as X user as the parameter with password, whatever, dot go to settings, change password, dot save, exit. And then when you do exit, you're back on the homepage or whatever. So it turns into almost like an English sentence, if you will. just with periods instead of spaces, and that's the method chaining and cascading, which helps out a lot. And then internally within those page objects, using custom objects for storing data in between it. So if a form gets another method, if a form gets another field, it's only like a few lines of code you have to modify instead of like a whole page object to accommodate for it. And then some generics in the backside to make every page conform to specific standards, and you don't have to remember about doing imports or anything like that. But by having a really good base page that everything else inherits from, you don't have to worry about minor details of the implementation. And you have very nice, easy methods to use internally within the page object, and then shared methods that you can use wherever you want to without having to redeclare them or import them from another odd package.
Awesome. So it sounds like when you follow your patterns, your good practices, if someone sets up their project like this, someone that may not be necessarily a Java coder or a coder in general, because the API is so readable and the way you have it written, it makes it easier for folks to contribute, is what it sounds like.
Yep. It makes it so it's, by following a specific set of patterns with it, you have very little code in each file, and thus makes it easier to follow along. By doing so, anybody can be a pretty good automation developer.
Very cool. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of times people use BDD for this, but you don't have to use BDD, all that overhead. You could create it like you mentioned in such a way where it is almost like English-like syntax, and it's more readable, more maintainable, and just a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like one of my biggest pet peeves is actually BDD, because very often it gets abused. And by that, I mean, like, a lot more extractions are made to support BDD-only tests, and that creates a lot of overhead. When you have that much overhead, it just makes the maintenance aspect of your framework a lot larger piece of your day, which I want to avoid as much as possible. So I sort of dislike BDD in that sense, but it is good for, it has some very specific use cases. And when you use it for those, it makes everyone's day a lot easier. But by shoehorning it into everything you can sort of make a mess.
No, I agree with you 100%. Definitely agree with you, especially with what I'm dealing with. But anyway, so cool. So we covered some patterns that your package provides people to get the framework up and running, to make their APIs more readable, more maintainable. So once you have that in place, you have some other topics to me that, like you mentioned, it is beyond what you normally get from a beginner's book, like security testing. So I thought maybe we'd go through a few of these, and maybe you just give us like a quick tip or what you're covering in that module that will help people. For example, security testing is a hot topic. When someone thinks security testing, they don't necessarily think of Selenium. So like at a high level, how can you leverage Selenium to help you with security testing?
Yeah, so there's a fantastic open source package called the OWASP ZED Attack Proxy, which, as the name entails, is a proxy server that you can run your Selenium tests through. And what it does, it records how it gets to all the different pages, and then it will replay essentially your test or how it got to each page. And on each page, it's going to try out a whole bunch of, I believe it's the top 10 security threats on each page, and try to beat your system to a degree. Like, it'll try to do SQL injections, or it'll try to do cross-site scripting attacks. And all that is literally spinning up a proxy server and running your Selenium test through that proxy server, which is like half day's effort at best. But then you can get some level of security testing done. Now, obviously, it's not like a full-end security test. However, doing that is way better than what most people typically do. And a little bit more than nothing is, well, way better than nothing.
Absolutely. And you're leveraging your existing Selenium test anyway. So it's like, again, this extra benefit. So I definitely think that's a great tip that people should definitely check out, which you cover in detail within this package. So if it doesn't sound like it makes sense to them, definitely they should check out this package and find out step by step how to actually do that. So awesome stuff.
As a bonus for it, it is a Jenkins plugin as well. So you can actually tie it into your continuous integration.
Oh, nice.
And then it's a non-event, essentially. You don't have to sit down and remember, I got to do security testing or anything like that. It's in the build system, and it runs, and you can get results, and you can set up whatever schedule, because it's Jenkins.
Yeah.
And then it's when it's another thing you don't have to think about, it makes your day go a lot easier.
So one thing that I hear folks that were coming from vendor tools to open source tools is they have a hard time managing the data. So a lot of hard times doing test data management. I believe you're going to have an actual module on this as well. Can you just talk a little bit more about what that's going to cover?
To go back in time a little bit, I came straight in from college into test automation. So I did not come into test automation with all the preconceptions of old school sort of testing where input this name, input this, use this name, use this user over and over again, or anything like that. So because of that, I did things a whole lot differently. And what I mean by that is that I actually don't really declare anything statically in my tests at all, because a name is just a string of characters. So typically I have a lot of methods that generate data for me, usernames, passwords, going by ANSI or UTF-8, whatever the case may be, to make sure that at some point in time, every last variation is going to be tested, and I don't have to write out every single one of those test cases. By doing so, I typically, obviously, I need to store all that new information, all those users that get created and everything. So in that module, I'll be going into how I set up Elasticsearch and use that as a DB of sorts to store all that data that I create in there. The reason I use Elasticsearch is because it is a search database by nature. So it has really good functions to retrieve data out of it. And since everything that gets stored into it is a JSON object, if I modify my test later on to instead, if I say, create a new user, and the user now needs to include a date of birth, I can just modify the object, the JSON object that's going to get sent to it, to include that date of birth. But it doesn't invalidate all my old entries. I don't have to do any mutations to the database. I don't have to transform the database to include new record types or anything like that. So it's one less thing I have to manage. And by doing so, it's a lot less headache for me and for anybody that uses it, because all the data is there. It's all been time-stamped. You know exactly when that user was created, even have a log of every time that user actually got used. If your systems, and there's a bunch of systems that are not using new data and you want to use old data over again, or users that are already existing in your system because they're very special custom one-off solutions for them. In that case, I typically have DB queries that get that user out of the DB instead of manually typing it into the test itself. Because if we have more than one of those clients, I don't care which client it is, just grab one of them. By doing that, obviously I'll get to all of the actual users at some point in time, but there could be an issue with one of them, but not the other ones. Like it could be some sort of configuration change that happened for one particular user when it shouldn't have happened. And by that case, I will find it because I'm not specifying a different client to use.
Yeah, so it's almost like rather than hard coding the same value over and over again, you're actually doing more than that because you're using the user with the same privileges, but you may find edge cases that you wouldn't have found if you're using a hard-coded user all the time, the same exact one. Right?
Yep, and actually for an example of it, there was a product where we had I think, like 15 different user types. And for a subset of these user types, they needed to have this brand new page they could get to. And it was hard-coded in that these test clients should have this new page. And the developers ended up writing it so that they hard-coded in that these 6 clients or whatever it was got this new page. However, since my test could grab them all the ones that should be matching, which was more like, I think it was like 50 some odd clients that was supposed to get this new page, they quickly found out, like, wait, why don't these clients have this new page? And it was, well, no, you said that these clients needed it. I was like, no, we said those are some sample clients that have to get this page. They all have some products associated with them. Those are the ones that need to get it. Anyone that matches those patterns. That was just a subset of the full list. And because I'd never hard-coded in those sample clients, we were able to find that issue before it went live.
Very cool. I guess the only thing I'd have concern with is if you have lame developers that when it runs in CI, they just want it to pass, and if it fails, they don't have time to look at it. So how do you debug stuff like that to make it quick to say, hey, I used this other user. It wasn't just like, why did this fail? It's been passing the past 10 users. Because you have random data, how do you know why it failed?
Yep. So yeah, that's another module actually, reporting, where I go into, like, I love the Allure framework because it plugs in with all the different languages I use. And in the Allure framework, the report that gets generated, it has every last bit of information that gets inputted into it. It all gets reported as different test steps. So when you go and look at the report, the log essentially of the report, you can see every step it took, every page that got loaded, what the page looked like, which elements got clicked on, and then all the data associated with it. So it's signed in with this client, this user. This is the UI. This is the unique identifier for it that's in the database, where the Elasticsearch DB, Elasticsearch cluster, whatever. That's inside Elasticsearch, so you can easily retrieve that user and see what got used, or if it was a DB query, what was the DB query and what was the returned result of it. There's not just the user that was used, but the whole list.
Awesome. So it's almost like a stack trace where you could see exactly what step was called and when and what it failed on and all that cool information.
Yep. Because digging through a stack trace of a typical Selenium project that runs in CI is a pain because it's all in like one log. With Allure, it makes it so you can see it test by test and makes your day a whole lot easier. And you don't have to try and recreate those conditions. If you want to recreate those conditions, you can easily take a copy of that test, make a new one, and then statically type in the user that you want to use, and it will still run. Because anytime I use a user, if I use no parameters, then it's just generate one from random or pull it from the database, whichever I set as the primary version of it. And then if I pass in parameters, if I overload it, then it's going to use that user in particular. So you can easily copy a test, paste it, add in the username and password, and then you can recreate that test every single time.
You have performance related as one of the features that are going to be part of this package in the future. Once again, it's another thing when people think of Selenium, they don't necessarily think of performance. So what do you mean by performance related?
So what I mean by performance related is I like the Taurus package because it allows you to quickly take a current Selenium test and turn it into a performance test of sorts. Or you can turn it into a JMX file and run it through JMeter, and that will include all that fun stuff. But what I also do for some of my tests, I actually have a performance indicator on it. And when the test is tagged with performance, it will actually save a HAR record of it, a HAR file, which is a HTTP archive file of it. And then it will take the HTTP archive file, which is every last network request that occurred during the session, and then upload it to Elasticsearch as well. And I can see how each individual page performed, along with how every test performed. And I can quickly see if there's been a regression in performance, and then obviously set it up with machine learning, basic machine learning, and you can see if there's a sudden performance regression with this current release, or if one particular page is running slower than usual. And by doing so, it's another thing you don't have to really worry about, you don't have to think about. You essentially just run your test as normal, and then you get alerts if, hey, stuff's running like 30% slower now. What's up with that? And you can then begin investigating, like, okay, what resource was it? Because when you pump it up to Elasticsearch, when you take the HTTP archive and you upload it to Elasticsearch, you can see resource by resource, page by page, how everything performed, and you can find what is causing this performance degradation, what is now taking longer. Because there's the nice graphical front end to Elasticsearch called Kibana.
Okay, Andrew, before we go, is there one piece of actual advice you can give someone to really leverage your Selenium above and beyond package, and let us know the best way to find, contact you, and get their hands on this awesome resource?
To get to this, go to seleniumaboveandbeyond.com. Down at the bottom are all the different levels that you can get. Different packages have different bonuses associated with them. There's different content that's within each package, but all the content's going to be the same. It's mainly just the bonuses that are different, such as the videos you can copy and paste directly from themselves, or videos of me doing like live debug sessions so that you can watch and learn how I debug tests or how I do coding. So if you go to seleniumaboveandbeyond.com, you can buy it there. The different packages have all the same content, but then the bonuses obviously differ. You can get videos of me doing live coding demos of like how would I automate this bit, how would I automate that bit, or debug stuff. Along with, you can copy and paste videos The highest end package actually has a whole bunch of more bonuses, such as how do you approach your manager and ask for the raise that you deserve because you've automated everything and you've raised the quality of the product to new heights. And how can you justify the raise? Because typically QA is seen as a cost center of a company, not really the profit-making department. But the benefit that you provide is something that's intangible. And by raising the quality of the product, you raise other people's trusts. You can follow me at lazycoder.io. And if you want just consulting, you can go to ginghamconsulting.com for straight up consulting services.
Thank you, Andrew, for your automation awesomeness. For links to everything of value we covered in this episode, head on over to testtalks.com/217. And while you're there, make sure to click on the sign up for free trial link under the exclusive sponsor section to learn all about Sauce Labs' awesome products and services. So that's it for this episode of Test Talks. I'm Joe, and my mission is to help you succeed in creating automation awesomeness. As always, test everything and keep the good. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to the Test Talks podcast. Head on over to www.testtalks.com for full show notes, amazing blog articles, and other automation awesomeness.